Hello and welcome to part 5 of SAP REP development. In today's session, we will understand how we can implement the value help and also see how we can associate the text using the associations. For this, uh, we have already defined the destination and arrival airport in our filter criteria. We can use the demo underscore I airport standard value help that is provided by SAP. The to add we can add the association of a carrier table and attach the carrier name field in order to get the text and assign it to our airline ID. Similarly, we will also do an association to the flight table to display the flight details as a separate facet in the object page. In order to achieve this, the changes we have to do in our data model will be like this. So we already have our connection entity. Connection entity, we can use the standard value help provided for airport in our uh, as an association, as a value help, not association, as a value help. Now, when we do this value help, it will display us the value help in our destination from and airport destination airport from and to. On top of it, we will have a one-to-one relation between our connection and the carrier for the carrier ID, and similarly one to n as connection between our connection and flight. So one connection can have multiple flights. In order to achieve the value help, SAP has provided a value help called uh, consumption, an annotation called consumption.value help definition that works on entity as well as association. Uh, in our case, since we already have an entity which SAP has already provided, we will be using the entity with name airport uh, with the name and the element which is nothing but the field name of that particular entity. Now, one thing we need to remember in case of value help is that we, even if we are using this entity, we no need to explicitly define this entity in our service definition. The entity and the source of this particular uh, the data of this particular entity will be they automatically exposed because value help definition will be consumed by our parent entity. So we will look into the system how we can actually define the consumption dot value help definition to achieve the value help. It is very straightforward and pretty simple thing to do once you have your uh, value help definition ready. If you don't have any standard value help CDS entity that is not given by SAP, we will have to create our own standard value help CDS entities and then link it using consumption.value help. For adding the association text, in our case, we already have a carrier entity given by SAP called demo underscore slash demo slash I underscore carrier, which we can associate it in our connection. And in order to uh, assign the text to any of the field, the related field in our connection table, we have to use another annotation called object model. Now, object model dot text will work on two things. One is the element. In our case, uh, we don't have element, rather we have an association because we will be associating the carrier to our connection. So we will use the second part, which is nothing but the association for airline or for the carrier basically in this case. This is wrongly written. Now in order to have the connection done between these two, there should be a semantic text is equal to true for the field that we are trying to actually link between these two. Following that, we will also go and uh, create a flight entity, a custom entity that we will be creating on the flight, associate it to our connection, add a facet in the connection entity to display the flight data as a table. Define the annotation in our flight entity to display the columns as we have seen in our connection. And then finally, we need to expose the entity in our service definition. If we don't expose it, the value will not be shown. This is a very important point to remember. With that, let's get into the system and see how we can implement the, let us see where we stand. Okay, so let's go to our service binding, our connection, and let's go to our application to pre where we have. Now we have actually added all the annotations to our connection, everything we have added, departure and destination airport. To our filter criteria, we have also added a global search field. We can click on go button to get the data. The main thing that we need to understand is that airport ID, if I click on the value help, it doesn't contain any value help. So let us first implement the value help here. In order to do that, we have to go to our connection and define the value help. So let's begin with our development now. First thing we will look into is the value help that we have to define. For that, SAP has already provided standard value help for the airport, wherein the airport ID is linked with a text element called name from the same entity. So we can use this entity as it is. In order to use this value help, we have to go to our connection and add a value help here. Before that, let us just check how our Fiori is working. If you see here, if you see the Fiori application, we have, let me quickly refresh it to make you understand. Currently, we do not have any value help defined to the departure airport or destination airport for that matter. Both of them, they doesn't contain any value help. Let us see how we can implement it. I will just implement it for the first one, and as I have told you, the annotation is consumption dot value help definition. Now in this we are actually linking an entity. So let's take the entity, and the entity name is DMO slash I underscore airport standard value help, and the element is, this element name should be same. We will not get help there. So just copy this and paste it here. Let us activate and see what is the difference that we are getting now on the application. Where is my application? Here. Okay. So once that is activated, you see the activation is still in progress. Once it is activated, we just go and see the difference. Let's refresh the application and see the difference there. Now we have actually added a value help for the departure airport, but not for the destination airport. Hence, the destination airport value help remains same as it was earlier. But for departure airport, if you click, you see the new value help will be defined here. We can search the value help because searching and everything is being provided in the standard value help. Let's say I want to search for San Francisco. Oh, it has given me the San Francisco with airport name. I can also check if I can find it with California, and for California I have two airports, so it searches in airport ID, airport name and the city as well. Okay, let me take SFO and also add one more thing called JF Kennedy Airport. Okay, two values I have actually taken, and that has actually been displayed here. Now if I click on go, it will give me all the records where the departure airport is either a JF Kennedy or San Francisco. Okay. Similarly, we can actually go and implement the logic here. Nothing but just copy the same code and assign it to airport ID, airport 2 ID as well. Shift F1 and we are done. Activate and done. Now let us see how we can implement the text for this carrier ID. Now we know that okay, this carrier ID, I don't know what AA means. So this carrier ID is actually defined in the carrier table, which is the DMO slash carrier table, wherein the carrier ID is linked and it is defined as headline ID, not the carrier IDs. If you see the name of the database field is carrier ID, but for the exposed entity, it is defined as headline ID. It is linked with the name using the object model text element, so we can use this entity directly in our connection entity to get the text there. Let us see how we can do it. So our demo I underscore carrier first has to be associated. To define the association, we will say association, the cardinality for one record in my connection table. I will have only one record in my carrier. You can define it like this also. It's one and the same thing, but it's always better to actually define the cardinality like this. Now association of these two, my demo I underscore carrier, always give an alias to it as carrier, and on which field the associations are a lazy join, so like it will have the same syntax of writing it. Like join, we will say okay, join A and B on so and so fields. So in this case we have projection dot, our field name is carrier ID. Now this should be linked to our association dot airline ID, not the carrier ID. Okay. Once you define this association, that means our connection and our carrier are now associated. But you'll get a warning, and that warning says that association is not used. That means whenever you define an association, it's a warning. So it's always a best practice to expose the association as well. So I am just exposing the association here as well. Sorry, it's a comma here, and I am just exposing the association carrier here. Okay. Now what it has done is it has added an association between the connection entity and our carrier entity with carrier ID as connection. Now, in order to define the text for the carrier ID, we need to use, as we have seen, we need to use the object model.text.element, the same way what we have seen in our demo carrier. Okay. Now, how we will define it is like, okay, our object model dot text, and now this text will come from an association. In our case, see, if you see, we also have the element. If we have anything, any field that is in our current CDS, we will use element. Otherwise, we will use association. In our case, we are using association, and that association is the carrier association. Okay. Once this is done, let's activate and see if there is any difference in our application now. So we have to wait till the activation is completed. Go to your Fury element, refresh the application, and now I am just clicking on go, and you see the AA is now shown with the proper text from carrier table. This is how we will be actually linking this to the association text to a field. Same thing, it will come in our object page also, because the same value is been defined here. Now, since we have already used the value help definition and it is automatically exposed, we are seeing the airport IDs as well here with the corresponding text. Okay. Now, the second part is that for this particular connection, I want to understand that how many flights are there. So so again, in the same fashion that we have demo carrier, we also have flight, demo flight, iFlight. Now, if you see the air flight, it has all the consumption and all the association object model and everything there with the search element and everything, but it does not have any UI annotations. So we cannot use this in our application because we have to display the flight data in the uh, flight data in the object page. So we cannot use this. This is a classic scenario where we can actually go and we should define our separate value. We can actually use the same entity in our entity CDS view that we are going to create, or we can use the table name demo flight. Okay, I will be using the table name demo flight. Now, how we can create is pretty simple. Go to the data definition, click on new data definition, and here you say that okay, we are now creating an flight interface view for flight, and the reference object I will say okay, please take it from flight. control space to get the help. And since I am actually linking it with the reference object, all the fields and everything will be provided to me. Click on next, select the TR, click on next, and here we will again go and say okay, define view entity and finish. What has happened is now it has actually taken all the fields from the demo flight table and provided us with the list. On top of it, we have to go and create a UI line item to display it in the line item facet. Position is equal to 10. Similarly, I will go and quickly add to all the other fields so that we can display it there. 40 price and then 50 is the currency code. I don't need to display that. 60, 70 and 80. Now why I don't need to display the currency code? Because price is semantically dependent object on currency. So as we have seen, we have to define the semantic dot. This is the amount field. So I will go and say, okay, please get me the amount annotation with the currency code. And my currency code field name is currency code, which is nothing but this field that we have. So everything is gone. Let us quickly activate the CDS entity. Okay, it is activated, and now we have to link the flight to our connection. Let's come to the connection thing and connection entity, and again give an association. This time it will be for one connection we can have multiple flights to our ZMAKS flight entity, as I will again give an alias on dollar projection. Now the field that we have there is my carrier ID is equal to flight dot, if you say carrier ID, and dollar projection dot connection ID is equal to my flight dot connection ID. Okay, this is how it is now been linked. Again, the same warning, please use or expose that association. I am just going and exposing the association flight. This will be, this is required to actually expose. Now once this is exposed, okay, the connection between the association between the connection and our flight table is already established. Now in order to display the data in the object page, we have to create another facet. Okay, let me create a facet. As you know, we have to create a facet here, comma, and this is an array of facet. Again the same thing. Now let's have the connection, the ID defined for the facet. Now this will be my flight ID flight. The purpose standard position will be 2. Now the label is flights, and now the type is not an identification reference, because identification reference will give a single instance of the table, but in our case we have list of instances, that is nothing but a tabular kind of entry. So in this case we will have it as a line item reference. Now since it is the line item reference, we need to tell the system from where it will show those lines, and those lines we already have in our association called flight. So to actually have that defined, there is a property called target element wherein we define our flight association and done. Okay. Ideally, this is all what we have to do. But if you go and still refresh our application, get the data and click on the detail, it is not showing me anything. And the reason being, as we have already seen, we need to go and define that in our or expose that in our service definition. Let me quickly expose ZMAKS I flight as well as flight and activate this. Once this is activated, let us see what's happening in our system now. So now since I'm refreshing it, you see it is now showing me the flight details. Again, we can go into this and there is nothing there. So we should also have to have one another facet which will actually display this particular thing, the details of the flights. Okay, and that will be same as what we have defined here. Okay, I'm not going and creating that because this video will be longer. But before that, what I want to show you is that you can actually have the search field now enhanced in such a way that currently I'm saying, okay, please give me all those values where the departure airport or the destination airport is SFO is JFK. Okay, but let's say if the user wants to understand what are the connections that has a plane type 767-200, for example. So what we have to do is the same way as we have enhanced this particular connection with the searchable thing, we have to do the same thing to our flight as well. Let's see how we can do that. So let's go to our flight first of all, and as we have seen that the first thing is the search.searchable. Okay, let me quickly have it side by side so that we can actually see what we can do. The first thing is, like, let me make this entity as searchable. So search.searchable is the annotation that we should use. Similarly, we have to go and define what column you have to make searchable. So here also I'll say, okay, search dot default search element is equal to true. Those are the two things that we have to define. As we have seen here that, okay, we have already added the search to this selection field. Okay, also a threshold that we have to define there so that fuzzy search can be enabled. Fuzzy search threshold is given. That's it. Now even if we do that, I have made this searchable. So if you come here and refresh your application and say, okay, please give me something with 767-200, it will not give me any values. The reason being, even though I have defined the flight entity as searchable with the corresponding elements that needs to be searched, I have nowhere told in my connection entity that flight is also searchable. So the way we have defined that this flight should also be made as searchable. So search dot default search element should be made true here. Once we do this, activate it back again. Let's go back to our system. Okay. and try to refresh. Let us first see some of our tables. American Airlines, it has got A320. Okay. Similarly, this flight number 15 has 767-200. So now I am saying, okay, give me 767-200. Wherever there are 767-200 flight types, give me those connections, and it has given me a list where it has, you see, 15 and 18 has 767-200. Now, uh, even if it is one flight that has a 767-200, the corresponding connection will be displayed. We can see that there are two types of planes with American Airlines. Okay, so this is how you can extend your search help to the global search to actually mm, uh, make it search the associated entities as well. Okay, before we wind up, and this is the last session on our read only application that we have to do. Of course, there is a homework that you can take up for yourself to create the object page for the flight. I will leave it up to you. And then before that, before we close, I want to uh, tell you a few other uh, properties of the values that are displayed here. We have not yet seen what this means. So whatever value we have here, it will export as, and it will export. So you can actually export it to your file, and that file will be actually downloaded and you know stored in your download thing. You see, it has actually created an Excel file. If you don't want to create an Excel file, you can export it as, and it will give you whether you want to export it to the Excel or a PDF file. Okay, now that is one thing that we have to see. We have already seen the adapt filters. Even whatever is being defined here by default, you can still go and adapt some other filters also for your uh, field. So let's say if I want to actually also say that, okay, I need a airline ID now, and the airline ID will be shown here, and I say, okay, give me all the connections for airline ID, and it will give me all the connections for airline ID with this search as well. If I remove this search and go, it will give me only for the airline ID. Okay, that is one thing. And now if you see this value that we see here are displayed in the settings. We have only seen the column, but there is a sort and there is a group. I want to sort it based on, say for example, the ID. I can just go and sort it based on the airline ID, but it is of course been sort already on the airline ID. I can sort it on, say for example, departure airport, and the data will now be shown in the ascending order of the departure airport. Similarly, I can go and I don't want the sorting now, but I need a grouping, and please group it by airline ID. Okay, ID of the carrier. This is the same name that we have here, and I say OK, and it will give me a list in the grouping of the airline ID. One more important thing that is there as a functionality is that if you see, this is a standard variant. This is same as what we have in our uh, SE38 reports variant. We can save. Similarly, you can save a variant as your name. Yeah, I'll say okay, max is max tutorials is the variant. Set this as default and apply automatically and save it. If you make this public, it will be available to everyone, but I want this only for me. So the user can actually define their own way of doing it and say save. Okay, so even if you refresh next time, you will actually go and get the data in the same variant that you have saved. Now, uh, if you come back again from the the service binding, okay, let me go to service binding and click on preview, okay, which has opened another page altogether, and it has actually come with that same setting that we have already shown. So this is very important feature. Whenever the user wants, he can actually display the data in their own format and finally save it as one variant. With that, we have completed the RAP development. Thank you and happy learning.